My name is Layla. I'm 28 years old. I have been married to my college sweetheart Henry for almost 3 years now. For the first 2 years of our marriage, we were both working, but I'm currently on a leave of absence. This story started 2 years ago when I went to my husband's parents' home for the first time to formally greet them as their son's wife. At that time, my sister-in-law was still living at home, and for some reason, she insisted on being present during my visit. I initially appreciated her presence since I knew I would have to meet her eventually, and it was convenient to get the introductions done, all at once. The conversation with my future in-laws went smoothly, but all of a sudden, I hate living with strangers. Even though you're Henry's wife, you're still a stranger to me, so don't ever consider living here. So my sister-in-law declared. We had been searching for a home somewhere between our workplaces and never had any intentions of moving in with them, so her words left me stunned. Also, my parents are very nice people, but don't think you can take advantage of them. When you have kids and decide to go back to work, don't expect them to babysit, and don't visit this house too often. She continued. Her words felt like an unwarranted attack, especially considering my husband and in-laws were present. They immediately reprimanded her and apologized to me so profusely that it was as if they were ready to get down on their knees. Seeing them apologize only seemed to fuel her anger, and she continued to rant, bringing up issues we had never even considered. It was way too ridiculous, and it turned my initial shock into a calm astonishment. If you feel that way, it would be better to call off our marriage, I said firmly, and then left, though my husband and his parents kept apologizing to me. Later, a meeting was arranged that included both sets of parents, my husband, my sister-in-law, and myself. However, my sister-in-law's hostile attitude toward me didn't change at all. Realizing this situation was not good for anyone, my in-laws decided it was best for her to move out. She had a job and earned enough to live independently, so she was essentially asked to leave her parents' home. Her new place was close to her workplace, in an area I had no connection with. My husband and his parents seemed to make an effort to avoid running into her, even at their home. She was conspicuously absent from our wedding, feigning illness. Since then, we never saw her face to face, so I could hardly remember what she looked like. I thought our relationship would continue like this, but she got engaged, which was an unexpected development. As it turns out, her fiancé was one of my father's employees. My father works for a fairly large company and has many subordinates, so I guess this sort of coincidence isn't impossible. I wish it hadn't happened. My sister-in-law was nearing 35 and had been eagerly marriage hunting. She finally caught a younger, good-looking, high-profile man, and it seemed to have sent her into a frenzy. Despite her previous hostility towards me, she started contacting me so frequently. She said things like, "We're close sisters, right? I've always cherished you as a sister." I had never had a decent conversation with her, let alone been close. But as I tried to respond vaguely to avoid confrontation, she took it as a sign that she was on the right track and started contacting me even more often. "We've always been close, and let's continue to be close. Can I visit your parents' house with my fiancé? I want to get along with your family too," so she said. When I received a call from my sister-in-law, I recorded it and let my husband listen. "What the heck is she saying? That rotten sister of mine," he said, thoroughly exasperated. He informed his parents about the situation since things might have gotten heated if I said it. Just as we were, my father-in-law was also thoroughly exasperated. "After all the rude things you've said, what is this nonsense you're spewing now? If you think about what you've done calmly, you wouldn't be able to make such calls." He said this to his daughter. Thanks to his intervention, I stopped receiving direct calls from my sister-in-law. However, in exchange, she sent me a thick letter. I wonder how she took her parents' anger. The letter was filled with unnecessary phrases like, "We are close sisters. I'm glad you married Henry. I absolutely want you to come to my wedding," with nothing else mentioned. She even included a folded pamphlet of her wedding venue with a sticky note that said, "It's more luxurious than where you guys had your wedding, so please enjoy it." She didn't have to do all this, as I was already planning to attend her wedding. I was gonna respond to the invitation, saying that I'd be present. I'd congratulate anyone who's getting married, regardless of who they are. I wouldn't want to do anything as shameful as what my sister-in-law did 2 years ago. I'm an adult with common sense. However, my attendance was just a plan. By the time of my sister-in-law's wedding, I'd be close to my due date, so I couldn't predict how things will go. It might end up with just my husband attending, without me. My in-laws had kindly told me not to overexert myself, and I planned to take their advice. After all, I was on maternity leave, and my sister-in-law should know this from my in-laws. Also, it seemed that my father received an invitation from the groom's side, as he was considered a superior. He said, "I'm not his direct boss, but it's not that I'm totally unrelated. And he's the man marrying Henry's sister. I intend to go, but I decline to give a speech. And there's the issue with the sister. You don't need to attend," he said to my mother with a slightly troubled tone. According to my mom, the groom had asked my dad to give a speech at the wedding reception. My father is in an executive position. The groom, at 30 years old, hadn't even managed to become a team leader yet, so he was in no position to even send an invitation to my father, let alone ask him to give a speech. Around the office, people seemed to talk about him like quite audacious and some nerve. According to what I heard from my in-laws, my sister-in-law had egged on her fiancé, saying, "He's not just a boss, but a family, since he's the father of my brother's wife. You don't need to hesitate. If we could get him to give a speech for us, it's a fast-tracked promotion for you. You can one-up the other employees by having an executive in the family." She seemed to have pushed her fiancé into this, and I couldn't help but worry about his future, though I'd never met him before. Workplace relationships and hierarchies aren't as simple as she thinks. She was the type of person who thought her values and opinions were justice, and if you were not the type of person who could firmly say no, you might be swayed by her. Before my sister-in-law's wedding, we had a discussion with my in-laws, and we decided that my husband would attend without me. And from my family, only my father would attend. My sister-in-law seemed very unsatisfied, but perhaps fearing that insisting on her opinion would result in neither my husband nor my father attending, she reluctantly agreed. And then came the day of the wedding. I was staying at my parents' house to prepare for my delivery, and my mother, who had also decided not to attend my sister-in-law's wedding, was taking care of me, as my labor could begin at any moment. We hadn't particularly talked about it, but I imagined her reception must have started about then. As I was relaxing and sipping my tea, my smartphone rang. It was from my sister-in-law. I wonder, isn't she in the middle of her reception? As I answered the call, "Why aren't you and your mother at the ceremony? It's utterly rude that you said you'd attend and then not show up." A hysterical voice ranted. "Hold on, we had agreed that we wouldn't attend, didn't we?" I retorted. "How dare you, as a sister-in-law, not do as your husband's sister says? You're basically a servant to the family you've married into, so what gives? It's bizarre how my parents and Henry are so compliant with you, and now my fiancé is in a bad mood because of it." My response only fueled her rage. Her ranting continued, and I managed to stop myself from saying I couldn't care less. I moved the phone away from my ear and listened to her tirade. My mother wore a puzzled expression, hearing the voice leaking from my phone. It appeared she had called during a break in the reception, and after a while, my sister declared, "I don't have much time right now, but you'll have to take responsibility for not attending the ceremony," and then hung up. Despite us informing her beforehand that we wouldn't be attending, she had the audacity to tell us to take responsibility. This perplexing statement wasn't the cause, but shortly after this call, my labor started. My mother grabbed the prepared bag for the hospital, called a taxi, and contacted my husband while we headed to the hospital. My mother was an ex-midwife, and she knew what to do. The baby won't be born immediately, so you can come to the hospital after the reception. You'll have plenty of time. She even instructed my evidently flustered husband over the phone. After hanging up with my husband, my mother said, "It'd be a hassle later on if Henry also had to leave the reception early, right?" With a mischievous smile. The delivery took longer than anticipated, lasting close to half a day, even after my husband, in-laws, and my father arrived. Our first child, a girl, was born at dawn. Exhausted and disheveled, I heard my husband say, crying like a child, "Thank you. What a beautiful baby girl. Let's cherish her to grow up, kind and thoughtful." My in-laws and parents were all overjoyed. I only heard about the aftermath of my sister-in-law's wedding and reception once I had settled down at home after I got back from the hospital with my daughter in my arms. It seemed it was quite a serious event. This serious has a negative connotation. Despite having discussed everything meticulously beforehand, my sister-in-law had assumed in her wedding-high mind that her brother and his wife, as well as his in-laws, would surely attend the wedding ceremony. It appeared she hadn't informed her fiancé about the decisions made in the family discussions, and also assured him, "Henry's father-in-law will accept to give a speech, so it's all good." My father had personally declined to the groom, suggesting that he should ask someone else instead. The groom had even proposed asking his direct superior, or an uncle. "I'm sure he will accept it if I ask through my brother's wife." I had no idea how she had convinced the groom that my father wouldn't accept to give a speech, while he had directly declined it to him. It was reiterated in front of my sister-in-law during the family discussion that he wouldn't do it, and yet no alternative prearrangements had been made. Because of my sister-in-law's actions, the ceremony and reception proceeded without a main speaker. The groom, who was supposedly overjoyed that an executive had accepted to give a speech on his wedding, was indeed thunderstruck. I assume he felt utterly embarrassed in front of the invited guests. Just picturing the bride and groom seating in shock makes my spine chill, even though I wasn't there. Naturally, the groom must have been upset and confused. He probably complained to my sister-in-law too. The ever-deteriorating atmosphere at the venue caused my anxious sister-in-law to call me during the break to change her dress. The groom gradually noticed more lies by observing the guests invited by my sister-in-law, and after the reception that was filled with tense mood, he suggested postponing their still uncompleted legal marriage registration. The lies my sister-in-law told her fiancé included, "I have a great relationship with my family. I am very close to my brother and his wife. That's why your boss, who is my brother's father-in-law, will support you. I graduated from a prestigious university and have a responsible job at a major company. I am a happy person, still surrounded by the good friends I made at the university." And so on. As you might guess, all of these were lies. My sister-in-law had been increasingly alienated within the family, even before she started spewing offensive remarks at me, and her relationship with her brother, my husband, was far from good. It goes without saying that my relationship with her was not good either, so there was no reason my father would favor my sister-in-law's fiancé. As I'd mentioned before, the groom didn't seem very competent at his job, so promoting him out of nowhere would indeed create an odd atmosphere within the company. Additionally, my sister-in-law's highest education level is high school. After graduating by the skin of her teeth as she was partying around without attending school properly, she was in a state of unemployment, occasionally doing some part-time work. After her 30s, she was hired as a part-time employee through the connections of her father. And of course, she has never had a responsible job. Even though she managed to commute without being late or absent, she was a burden who could not handle phone calls, making copies, or checking emails properly. There's no way such a person would have friends. Even if there were some acquaintances when she came across in town, they were not someone close enough to invite to the wedding, so she used a dispatch service to fill the seats. Thus, the speeches made by such so-called friends sounded obviously fake. At a ceremony to celebrate a new beginning, it was unlikely that there would be any reconciliation between my sister-in-law and her fiancé, after so many lies and secrets had been exposed, no matter how hard she tried. Currently, it seems that discussions with the lawyers are still ongoing. After hearing all of this, I remembered the words my husband had said when our daughter was born. Let's cherish her to grow up, kind and thoughtful. Now I realize these words had a very deep meaning. Neither I nor my parents have any intention of getting involved in whatever resolution my sister-in-law comes to. Even my father-in-law said firmly, "That's fine. I don't want any weird influences on my granddaughter, so I'd rather you don't get involved." I know it's not easy to live without any lies or secrets, and there are gentle lies made in care for one another. I believe they work fine as long as they are based on proper common sense. Come to think of all the things my sister-in-law had said and done, I even take them as a great lesson to learn what not to do. That's how I deeply feel now. My husband and I are about to start raising our first child. We are discussing that we want to cherish and nurture her so she can grow up to be a person who can be proud of herself, enjoy spending time with many friends without causing trouble to others, and lead a happy life. I think it would be delightful if we could also grow as parents in the process.